Great. Okay. So we will go ahead and get started. Welcome. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on what side of the coast you're joining from. I'm so happy that you joined us. My name is Elise Swanson. I'm the Associate Director of Research at the Center for Education Policy Research at Harvard. And I am happy to be presenting on behalf of a large team, some of our work done in collaboration with the Los Angeles Community College District, looking at distance education and how the district has supported student success and faculty well-being in these modalities. So just to give a bit of a roadmap of what we'll be talking about in the first part of this webinar today, I'll give a little bit of context about the Los Angeles Community College District, or LACCD, just so that everyone's familiar with the context that we're talking about. I'll then go into some of the different distance education modalities offered within LACCD so that we have a clear definition of what we mean when we're talking about distance education and the different flavors that are offered. Then I'll share some descriptive findings of student outcomes across modalities. I want to just preview upfront that we're not sharing any sort of causal impacts of being in one modality or another for a particular course that's coming from this project. But today I'll just be talking about sort of descriptively what do student outcomes look like across the modalities. And then finally do a little bit of thinking ahead of what will distance education look like as these modalities continue to be popular and in demand amongst students, and how we can support students there. We'll then transition into sort of a moderated Q&A, and we'll have a chance to take your questions throughout. So if you have any questions that come up, please feel free to put them in the chat at any time. So to start, just to give everyone some context on LACCD, this is the largest community college district in California and is one of the largest systems in the country. There are 9 campuses in total, all of which are designated as Hispanic serving institutions, and a few of which are also designated as serving additional populations of traditionally minoritized students. As you can see from the map, it's a very spread out district. If you were to go from sort of Mission up here to Harbor down here, it would take anywhere from an hour to 2.5 hours, depending on that LA traffic. There were just under 120,000 students enrolled in fall of 2023. And you can sort of see some of the persistence and 3-year completion rates for the 2018 cohort. So sort of like many community colleges, sort of have some room to grow on student success, and that's been a big focus of the district as well. And in 2023, there were about 4,000 teaching faculty within the district. And you can see the breakdown of folks who were either tenured or tenure track and adjunct. Thinking specifically about the student body, as I mentioned, it is very diverse, and sort of the largest share of students are Latinx, and that's been pretty consistent from 2017 to 2022 when we just look at snapshots of all students enrolled in the district, whether full-time, part-time, first-time, continuing, sort of everybody in the mix. And you can see that sort of the shares by race ethnicity have been fairly consistent over this time. When we look at faculty, we also see that there's a pretty diverse teaching faculty within the district, although it does skew a little bit more white than the student population as a whole. So turning now to distance education, sort of our main topic for the day, I want to start just by giving some definitions of what are the different options of distance education that are available to students enrolled in the district. So first and sort of most common is asynchronous online. So this is where there's sort of no room on campus. Students are working independently to complete coursework sort of based off of a schedule that's set by the faculty, and they're pre-supplied with content through recorded lectures, videos, texts, things like of that nature. And then they're sort of reacting to discussion posts, completing work, and sort of doing that independently throughout the semester. Next is synchronous online. So this is where there is sort of live instruction happening, but it's occurring through an online platform such as Zoom rather than in face-to-face instruction. Dual delivery or high flex. This is where there is an assigned room on campus and there is sort of live real-time instruction taking place, but students can choose whether they participate in that in a face-to-face format or sort of an online format. And that's enabled through technology, whether that's built-in cameras and microphones or portable technology such as owls. So there's really a sort of seamless experience between the students in the room and the students on Zoom. And students can choose sort of on a session-by-session basis how they're attending that course. And then finally, there's hybrid or blended learning, where parts of the course are taught in person and other parts are taught online, typically asynchronously. So this might be something where some content is sort of taught asynchronously, and then students come together for more activity-based or hands-on portions of the course. Within the district, here you can just sort of see the share of courses offered in these different modalities over time within the district. As you sort of look over here to the left, you can see that asynchronous courses were offered in the district prior to the pandemic and accounted for between 10 and 20% of all sections offered within the district. And then when the pandemic hit, of course, as happened in many institutions across the country, all of those in-person courses were sort of shifted to synchronous online courses. And as campuses have opened back up and folks have been able to return to campuses safely, we've seen the share of sections offered in person sort of go back up, the share of synchronous online courses decrease, but the share of courses that are offered sort of asynchronously have remained quite high and are sort of popular amongst students as an enrollment option. So in order to sort of ensure that there's high quality instruction and learning occurring across all of these different modalities, the district undertook a vast amount of work when the pandemic first hit to sort of train faculty to become distance education certified. And that work has continued since the pandemic. And the two main courses that are offered that are required for certification are Introduction to Online Teaching and Learning and Introduction to Teaching with Canvas. And so as part of this project to understand distance education in the district, we observed these trainings that we could sort of understand, how is high quality distance education being defined by the district? What does that look like? What does that mean? What are the practices that faculty should be doing in order to support student success? And so some of these recommended practices include sort of modeling what it means to be an engaged student. So if we want students to be successful, we need to sort of offer them very tangible, concrete definitions of what it is that they need to be doing and what does that look like so that they know what success means. Making sure that course policies are easy to find, they're accessible, you can maybe get to them through a few different ways on Canvas so that, again, students know what's expected of them and how to be successful. And then making sure to sort of humanize the learning. So faculty really taking the time to sort of let the students get to know them and who they are as people. And so that there's more of that relationship and sort of personal connection, even in an asynchronous environment where students feel like they know who their instructors are, they feel like they can be themselves, they feel like they belong and they're part of a community. Introduction to Teaching with Canvas gets a little bit more into the nuts and bolts of how can you use this learning platform to support student success. And so some of the recommended practices there are ensuring that all course materials are accessible. So making sure that things are ADA compliant, there's closed captioning, things are accessible to all students and all learners. Providing training tools so that students know how to navigate the platform and how to find what they need on Canvas, right? There's both learning the content, but then there's also learning, how do I engage with this course? How do I find what I need? How can I be successful in these ways? And then really recognizing that students are coming in with a variety of technology skills and sort of comfort with the use of technology and making sure that students have options and support so that regardless of how they're coming in, they're still able to engage with the course content, find what they need, and be successful in these online platforms. We also conducted a series of focus groups with faculty within the district because we wanted to get a sense of what were the challenges that were sort of emerging organically in the courses and what were the innovative practices that they were developing and finding to be successful in sort of addressing those challenges. And two big challenges that we heard were sort of building relationships, so both between the instructor and students and amongst students in the course, and then encouraging student engagement, how to make sure that students are sort of active participants in the courses, in their learning, and are able to get to that deeper learning and understanding through their engagement. So these were two challenges that faculty were confronting across distance education modalities. And they also had developed some strategies that they found to be useful in trying to mitigate these challenges. So faculty found that sort of using icebreakers, discussion boards, course announcements could sort of foster a sense of community and help build relationships with their students and sort of among the students in their course. Some students also, or some faculty also found that offering in-person gatherings were really helpful in both forging connections and sort of solidifying learning. So doing things like taking a nature walk to identify plants if you're in sort of an ecology class, or just having like optional in-person gatherings for people to come ask questions, meet each other, sort of get out from behind the screen or from behind the pre-recorded lecture to really get to know each other as people and sort of build those relationships. And we heard that, some faculty had really high take-up when they offered these in-person opportunities. Some had slightly fewer participants, but they found that if they kept doing them, then more students would come. And they thought that this was a really useful way to sort of use sparingly, but to build relationships in a meaningful way. And then again, these sort of humanizing practices, how can you sort of infuse part of yourself as an instructor into the course so that students feel like they're really getting to know you and they're comfortable like reaching out, asking questions, and sort of being full people as well as learners. And then to encourage student engagement, faculty found it helpful to sort of have like live discussion-based assignments. So it might not be like face-to-face or on video, but you could use sort of different platforms or discussion boards to have people like responding or chatting to each other in real time so that you have that sort of feedback and dynamic feel even in an online platform. Faculty found it really important to sort of give feedback on all assignments. And this was also sort of a key recommended practice from the trainings, just so that students know that faculty are taking their work seriously, they're taking the time to review it, and they're taking the time to give them feedback and to help them learn and grow throughout the course of the semester. That seemed to be a really powerful tool for encouraging student continued engagement and effort in the course. Providing guidance and resources to facilitate on-camera participation if students felt comfortable using a virtual background or a blurred background, so that sort of regardless of where they were joining from, they could be on camera and sort of have that, again, like dynamic interaction. And then sort of having short videos to prepare content. We heard 7 minutes as one recommendation, so sort of like chunking up the material, and then embedding quizzes within the videos themselves so that as students are sort of watching the content, they're completing questions for points so that they're engaging, thinking about the content in real time, and they're not sort of skipping over the videos and jumping straight to the assignment and not having had that foundation of knowledge that they need to be successful there. So these were sort of the definitions that we heard of, how is high quality distance education being defined through some of these district trainings and through some of these emerging practices from faculty. And we were also interested in sort of understanding, from the student experience, what is the difference of being in some of these courses? And so we asked faculty on a survey to describe, what is different about these courses? How do they look or feel different from a design perspective? And so we piloted a survey with a small group of faculty last spring. So these are sort of pilot results. We're fielding a larger survey now, so we'll see if anything changes when we get a larger sample. But what we found from this pilot survey is that there are sort of big differences, as you would expect, in course design across the modalities. And so here we're comparing asynchronous courses to in-person courses. And then, for a few different aspects of course design, we asked faculty to say, did this happen sort of less often, more often, or a similar amount across these modalities? And so, for example, starting on the left, we asked, about group activities. And almost, over 70% of faculty said that these happened less frequently in asynchronous courses than in in-person courses. And we also see sort of, fewer peer interactions and less lecture time in asynchronous courses than in in-person courses. But the number of assignments was either like quite similar or maybe a little bit more for asynchronous courses than in-person courses. So the design of these courses are a little bit different. And then we also asked a little bit about, what does student participation look like, and how does this maybe spill over into their broader engagement with the campus community? And faculty tended to say that there was less course participation, less participation in study groups, and less utilization of campus resources like tutoring centers or other student support services on campus when students were taking asynchronous courses versus in-person courses. So there are sort of these design features that are a little bit different across the modalities, and that maybe also is related to how involved students are with each other and on campus. We also wanted to get a sense of, is there a difference in how much content faculty feel they can cover when they're teaching across these modalities? Are these courses sort of similar? Are they covering more content, less content, depending on the modality that they're being offered in? And so here, each bar is sort of comparing a different distance education modality to in-person courses. And so for most faculty, for really all modalities, they're saying that the share of content that's covered is pretty similar regardless of format. And there's maybe a little bit more content covered in asynchronous or hybrid courses than in person. And then finally, we asked them, sort of thinking about everything, how different is the student experience depending on the modality? The asynchronous experience versus in-person, faculty, the majority of faculty, about 70%, thought that experience for students as a whole was very different from in-person. Hybrid courses were sort of the most similar to the in-person experience. That's where, parts of the course are sort of taught online and other parts are taught in person. And then, sort of synchronous is sort of split. And then high flex is a little bit more similar or to in-person. So we're seeing that there are these real differences in how courses are being designed and what students are sort of experiencing as students, even as the content might be sort of similar across these modalities. And so knowing, how distance education, high quality distance education is being defined, knowing the differences in the student experience and sort of what is happening in these courses, we wanted to get a sense of, what might students' outcomes be across the modalities, right? How are they sort of experiencing and succeeding across these different modalities? And so again, from our from our faculty focus groups, we heard some hypotheses that certain students might be more successful in distance education. And in particular, faculty talked a lot about the need for students to have these sort of self-regulatory skills so that they're able to stay on top of the coursework, really be self-directed in their own learning. And if they were able to do that, then they would be very successful in these asynchronous or online courses. And they could provide sort of a flexible option for students to stay engaged, take courses, and sort of progress towards their academic goals. But faculty were also concerned that there were some students who maybe hadn't had the opportunity or the support to develop these skills yet. And so they would struggle in these courses, not because they couldn't learn the material or they couldn't do the work, but because they would sort of forget to log in, and they wouldn't take the quiz, they wouldn't do the discussion, they wouldn't sort of complete these assignments, or maybe they would wait until the end of the semester and try to cram everything into a week. And that would sort of let them down, and that lack of engagement would be what sort of hurts their overall success. So these were sort of the hypotheses that we heard. And then we wanted to see in the administrative data, what does this actually look like in terms of student GPA? So on this chart, we're focusing in on first-time in college students who were enrolled full-time in their fall semester. So they started off as full-time students. They stayed enrolled in the spring. They could have gone to part-time in the spring, but they still showed up in the district. So we limit our sample just to these students. And then we looked at what was the average first year GPA among students who didn't take any credits online, so they were fully face-to-face, students who took some but less than half of their courses in any distance education modality, and then students who took the majority of their courses in a distance education modality. And we did this by cohort. And so here you can see sort of the average first year GPA among these FTIC students in 2017 through 2022. And what's interesting here is that we don't see a consistent advantage of a particular modality, right? Or a particular concentration of courses taken in either face-to-face or online modalities. It sort of shifts around by term. Sometimes there's an advantage for taking the majority of your courses online. Sometimes there's an advantage of taking them, all of your courses face-to-face, sometimes sort of having a mix of both. And so what this tells us is that, there probably is a lot of sorting of students into modalities based off of where they think they'll be successful. And we want to sort of dig in and understand, okay, which students in which types of courses under which circumstances are more successful across these different modalities. And understanding that then can help provide better guidance to students as they think forward and think about, okay, how can I intentionally choose modalities so that I can sort of maximize my likelihood of success? So while we're not seeing these big differences in terms of GPA across the modalities, what we did hear from faculty is that there's maybe something that's fundamentally different about taking your courses online versus coming to campus, and that this is maybe sort of shifting the community college student experience in important ways. And so faculty talked a lot, and you can sort of see the quotes here, about the importance of having that social environment and that social interaction between students that facilitates deeper learning, that facilitates exploration, and that sort of allows students to reap these sort of less tangible benefits or gains of the community college experience. The sample here, so this is from the administrative data. So this is sort of all first time in college students here. So this is around 8 to 10,000 students per cohort. This is all students, all first time in college students who were enrolled full-time in the fall semester. So it's a fairly large sample. And we did also pilot a student survey, and we wanted to get a sense of, are these hypotheses from faculty that maybe something is different about the student experience when they're taking courses online versus in person. And we wanted to get a sense of sort of student sense of connection to campus, their sense of belonging on campus, and sort of how they're feeling overall about their experience as students. And one thing that we saw is that there is a difference in sort of student sense of belonging to campus based off of whether they're taking the majority of their courses in person or through distance education modalities, where students who are taking the majority of their courses in person have a higher average sense of belonging than students who are taking the majority of their courses in online formats, although there's obviously a lot of overlap here between these two groups. And it could be, that there's something about taking courses in person that facilitates student sense of belonging, that they sort of are a part of a campus community, they're valued, and that they feel that sort of connection. It could also be that students who don't feel that sense of belonging are more likely to choose to take more of their courses online because they don't sort of feel that affiliation with the campus. So again, this isn't causal, but it's sort of a descriptive finding that we think is interesting and sort of merits future scrutiny. So when we think about the future of distance education, we sort of asked faculty about this and just sort of looking at the patterns of student enrollment. distance education is not going anywhere, right? This seems to be something that is popular among students and is maybe essential for maintaining enrollments, equitable access, and meeting student needs. So faculty talked a lot about how students, maybe started a course, started a HyFlex course attending in person, but then because of shifting situations at home or outside of school, they weren't able to keep coming to campus, but they were able to maintain their enrollment and do well in the class because of the flexibility offered by the HyFlex format, right? And sort of in subsequent semesters, they could take more of their courses online. And so faculty are really committed to figuring out what is the right mix of options to offer, knowing that all of these options probably have a role to play and in the district moving forward. And again, we're seeing that students really seem to appreciate having the flexibility of the different options. We've started talking to students through some focus groups, and we're hearing a lot about how distance education and online courses can really make it possible to attend community college, even as they're working, they're caring for children, they're caring for others in their family. And so that flexibility is really critical. And so as students continue taking these courses, it's really imperative that we figure out how can we make sure that students are learning and having those high quality learning experiences so that they're able to continue being successful as they progress through their academic career and into the workforce. And then finally, the shift to online education has required a lot of work on the part of folks in the district, some of whom you'll be hearing from in a minute, and on the part of faculty and students. These were huge adjustments that had to be made to shift all of these courses to these different modalities. It's a very different experience for both instructors and students, and we know that people were sort of dealing with a lot of upheaval and disruption just sort of in their lives in general during this time. And so we need to be mindful of these realities and sort of the stress and the pressures that have been placed on faculty and students so that they're able to be supported in sort of holistic ways as we move forward and continuing to offer distance education. And with that, I'll pause. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. And then we'll turn it over to our panel for a moderated discussion. But I'll just wait a minute for folks to put any questions in the chat that they may have. Great. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll also have time at the end to come back to those. But with that, I will stop sharing and turn it over to Soumya, Jessica, and Wendy for our panel.
Thank you, Elise. Hi, everyone. I'm Soumya Mishra. I'm a researcher at the University of Southern California, and I'm part of the larger research team working on this project. And for this segment of the webinar, I'm joined by two colleagues from LACCD, Wendy and Jessica. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're excited to learn from your expertise about what high quality distance education is and what it takes to support faculty in delivering those options. To the audience, as we are having this conversation, please feel free to share any questions that come up for you in the Q&A box, and we'll save time at the end of the session for the panelists to respond. To start with, Wendy and Jessica, if you could just please introduce yourselves, your names, your role in the district, your home campus, and your experience with teaching distance education.
I unmuted, so I'll go first. My name is Jessica Drabond. My background is I'm an English professor at Southwest College. That's my home college. And my current role is that I help coordinate the DE efforts across all 9 colleges. So I'm a district level distance education coordinator.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dr. Wendy Bass. I am a distance education coordinator at LA Pierce College. My background is I'm a psychologist in the child development department. I have been a DE coordinator for 18 years and been teaching online for 22 years.
Great. Again, thank you both for joining us. So to start us off, the shift distance education was unexpected. It was rapid and on a mass scale. Can you talk a little bit about some of the successes you're most proud of, whether it was in the initial transition or since then?
I can start. Yeah, I would say, first of all, it's just the collaboration that took place across the district. My position didn't exist before COVID. I don't know that it would have without it. It's something we had been advocating for a long time, that we needed some district level coordination, but it hadn't happened yet. Once COVID hit, we all just like all hands on deck went and kind of attacked the issue and worked together. Before COVID, we had all been doing separate trainings. There wasn't necessarily consistency across the district of what was required to teach online. So at one college, you might only need to take, one short class. At another college, you'd have to take 2 8-week courses. So we really just all came together and collaborated to really do what we could to support faculty. And that includes faculty. So it includes the distance education coordinators across the colleges, but also just faculty who are experienced in teaching online, became mentors to other faculty. We had over 500 trainings that first week when we all knew that we had to transition our classes online. So that collaboration just absolutely is what allowed us to make this incredible shift that was such a lift at the time. I would have felt impossible if someone had described it to me before COVID. But it was possible because of the collaboration and the resources that the district was willing to give us to make this change possible.
And I would also say the support also was so crucial. I mean, we literally we were all on Zoom calls with each other, like 2 hours every day, talking about how we could support each other, guide each other, crying too. That the support was really crucial. And one of the things that came out of it that's unexpected that we're really proud of is that when this happened, it really taught our faculty to be more empathetic about what our students may be going through, because everybody was so equally vulnerable in that time. And so a lot of our faculty were like, oh my God, this is really tough for everybody. So to be a little more relaxed with due dates and a little more relaxed with like understanding and empathetic. And I think that that was a big step for us and our faculty to help us support the faculty as well as the students and understanding that we are all in this together.
And going forward, what, from your point of view, are the biggest challenges in improving the quality of online learning at LACCD?
I can start on that one. I would say probably one of our biggest challenges is that there's oftentimes a gap between what we are offering in all the trainings and support and what's actually happening in the online classes. So although we hope that everything we're training in terms of humanizing your course and bringing your personality into it and being really present and available and giving individual feedback to students, it may not always be happening within the actual online environment. And so I would say that's probably one of our biggest concerns in some ways, is making sure the quality stays the same. And because we have a very strong union, the accountability aspect of it is a little bit sticky at times, because if you're not up for evaluation, which is usually every 3 years, even if things aren't going well online, we can't really do anything about that. So, and our role is a little bit stickier because we are fellow faculty members. So we belong to the same union. So although students may be like asking for help and support, we can like contact the faculty member to offer more support, but we can't really do anything beyond that.
Yeah, and I'll just add, other challenges include the fact that technology is always changing. It feels like every year we're procuring a new app or software that we want faculty to use, but there's only so much time. And, when you're teaching online, not only are you doing all the usual teaching things of grading and planning lessons and all that, but you're also having to keep up with the technology, make sure your content is ADA accessible. It's just a matter of there's only so many hours in the day, and a lot of work in online teaching is front loaded. And so it just puts a lot of pressure on the faculty teaching in that modality.
And related to what you both just mentioned about the trainings that the faculty go through, what are some of the hurdles in ensuring high quality professional development? And are there any strategies that the district has found useful in addressing these challenges?
I could start. Go ahead, Wendy.
No, you.
Please. Okay. I was just going to say, funding had always been a hurdle, especially across 9 colleges. The smaller colleges had kind of by definition smaller budgets. I was coming from Southwest, a small college where we had basically no budget for distance education or trainings, whereas some of the other colleges, were really willing to put that investment in. So one of the hurdles had been funding. I think that's gotten better since COVID because we've standardized our trainings across the district. My position exists where now we have kind of centralized all of our trainings and webinars, and that means more equity across the campuses in terms of what faculty have access to. And just the fact that we had more access to funds. There were COVID emergency funds that the state provided, and the district was willing to put a lot of those funds towards distance education. So that helped with that hurdle. We're kind of coming back to that hurdle now that those funds no longer are available, and we're trying to figure out how do we sustain these practices that we started. How do we sustain our peer online course review programs, our POCR programs, to ensure high quality online education? We're trying to figure out, now that the COVID budgets have dried up, how do we keep that going? So that continues to be a hurdle. Wendy, did you want to add to that?
I would just say one of the things that we were really fortunate about is our district academic senate was very supportive. And so a lot of hurdles that we would have hit, we were able to overcome pretty early on because district academic senate, in our union contract, it says that the training requirements fall under senate. And so right away, we've been very involved with senate, and they really helped us jump over a lot of the hurdles to get like a cohesive, like Jessica said, like my campus, we had 8 weeks of training that was required. Another campus had 2 weeks. And so right away, we were able to get we all kind of came to the same level that we expected, the 8 weeks of training. And it really makes a difference. Just on a personal level, I will say, as a mom who sees kids that classes have to go online and back and forth, if you don't know how to use the tools, it's really tough on the kids and on the students, and you lose them. And our fear is we want to keep our students, we want them to be successful, and we want the students to learn the material based on learning the material, not because they're struggling because the instructor didn't know how to set up a quiz correctly. And so that's one of the things that we're really, that in the trainings, it's not so much that we're trying to get you, it's that we really want our faculty to know how to use the tools so they can focus on teaching their content and not worry so much about if the students are going to be overwhelmed because the tools aren't being used correctly.
Yeah, and I would add too, a hurdle has been faculty resistance to additional training. It's easy to think, well, I know how to teach, so I know how to teach online. But I do think that one of the benefits of COVID, it was even instructors were in a position of learning new things. And many instructors had not been in that position for decades. You become an expert in your field, and you think you've kind of learned all you have to learn, but then you go to set up a Canvas quiz and you're humbled pretty quickly. So I think that was helpful. And also we try to come from the standpoint of we all have the same goal, which is student success. So if we come at that from that perspective, and it's not punitive to do these professional development trainings, it's just to help students in the end. We're all just trying to make sure that students have a good experience.
And looking forward, I know it's been 5 years since COVID started, and LACCD is still offering a lot of online courses. What do you see is the future of online education at LACCD? Is it here to stay?
I think that it's here to stay. I'll never forget when I got my job originally as the DE coordinator, someone said, "Oh, don't get too comfortable in this position because distance education is just a fad." So obviously, that's not true. When we look at the future, one of the things we really are looking at is hoping to get more engaging technology to engage our students more and to be more interactive with them. So there are some specific tools that we've brought into our learning management system, which for our district is Canvas. We're using things like Pronto and Harmonize and VoiceThread. Those are ways that we can annotate videos, annotate images, be more interactive with our students. And that's kind of our goal, is to try and help our faculty build more community within their online classes, because as you can see from the data that Elise was showing, that a lot of our online students aren't feeling that sense of community. So one of our goals is really humanizing the class, but also helping the students feel more connected with other students as well.
Yeah, and I just add to that, I think that's the kind of the next step of what we're trying to teach faculty is now that you've, you know, I don't want to say mastered because no one's mastered it, but you know, you got the hang of the Canvas tools and you get the concept of designing an online class. How can we take that to the next level and encourage faculty to do things like I was telling Wendy something that my husband does is he holds these like online study hours where students can just join, where he's grading in the background. He's there to answer questions. It's less pressure. It's a little more social, where he's just playing music and available, and students can come work on their essays and he's working on his work, and they're all just kind of hanging out together. And I think that's kind of the next step is like also how do we offer things like student clubs online for the students who are taking the majority of their courses online, giving those social opportunities so students have a place online to interact and feel connected as well.
Great. And you guys preempted sort of my next question, which was you're already thinking about what are the ways that students can actually be supported in this era of expanded distance education. So I'm going to take a couple of questions that have come in from our audience, and they already look very interesting. So the first one is about the high flex modalities and the specific challenges that it poses for instructors in terms of lesson planning and managing the online versus in-person students. So what has been the experience with those courses at LACCD?
I'll take that one because we kind of took the lead with the high flex. It is a different type of teaching. So one of the things that we're doing is we're requiring that everyone who wants to teach high flex is DE certified. So they've taken the 2 trainings, the 8 weeks, and now there'll be an additional training specifically to high flex because it is a different type of teaching, being able to manage what we are called the Zoomies, which are the students online, and the Roomies, which are the students in class. So we've actually developed a training, which is about 2 hours in person, where we're talking about not only using the technology, but also the pedagogy of how do you include the Roomies and the Zoomies together to create more of a community. So we are encouraging, we do know it's a different way of teaching, and so that we're actually offering training specific to how do you teach this way.
And I think also going into it with the expectation that not everyone's going to want to do this, and that's fine. We only want the people who are, you know, on board and feel like they can do a good job of this to be the ones to participate rather than like reluctantly dragging people into this modality that they're not comfortable with, because students will pick up on that.
Right. And we have another question from Meredith regarding sort of this uptake in bots or fraudulent students that we've heard of to some extent at LACCD, but it really is happening nationwide in community colleges. So has any of the work that's been done around humanizing online courses, any of those strategies perhaps helpful in understanding if there are bots, etc., in a classroom, and have any other strategies been helpful at the district?
I think a lot of the same principles apply for sure. The same things that we encourage faculty to do to humanize their class are also ways to make sure that we have authentic students in the class. So we do always try to give students a heads up when things like cameras are going to be required in a class. So we put that in our schedule of classes so students know going into it, I have to have this technology available, but I also have to be comfortable with, you know, making a video. But having said that, that's a way to kind of ensure that it's an actual student. So doing things like requiring a video submission to a discussion rather than just a written response, which can be achieved by a bot. The video lets you see a real person. It ensures that it's an actual student. And, you know, the more interactive that, you know, it can be hard because sometimes students want to just do the easy thing of just like typing out an answer real quick, but you know, we're going to demand a little bit more of them. It is going to create a better learning situation for the students and the interaction with the faculty, but it is also a way of making sure it's a legitimate student rather than a bot.
Right. We have another question from Wendy Kilfoyle, and she's asking about are there any trainings that are offered to faculty regarding the use of the learning management system, Canvas in this case, to identify at-risk students and plan interventions for them, or to ascertain whether the faculty interaction or presence is affecting the student's experience.
I mean, I think that one of the things we always do is we work on data-driven decisions as we design any of our future webinars. And right now, we just finished our planning for the summer, and now we're going to be planning all of our fall webinars. So we look back and go, okay, what are some areas that we really need to focus on? So for a lot of it right now is the bots and humanizing and what we can do to help weed out what may be a bot and what may be a live student. And one of the things that we have to really focus on too, though, is when we're requiring too much technology. Some of our students are coming from very lower income areas. They may not have the best bandwidth. They may not have the best technology. So we also really try to focus on that as well. We don't want to weed out students who are real students just because they don't have the technology too. So we're really focusing a lot on the on the technology that you can use and what students have access to. Even this last semester, I made them do a video introduction, and some students didn't. And I was like, before I dropped them, I just said, hey, can you Zoom with me? Can we just set up a time? And some of them, I was Zooming with them at like 9:30 at night because they were at work all day. And I'm like, that's fine. I just want a 5-minute, just let's get online together. And they weren't bots, they were real students, but they didn't know how to do the technology. And I'm like, oh, you could have used your phone, and I taught them how. But some of them don't even realize that you can just like make a quick video and upload, from the phone area. We think that that's something that they know because of Instagram and TikTok and all that stuff, but it isn't necessarily something they're thinking about using within a class. And so I would say that's one of the things. So we definitely are using data to design what kind of webinars we're doing with our students. As far as the LMS to identify at risk, we give strategies, like if a student hasn't logged in for this long, these are some best practices on how to engage them, but we don't really have a mechanism in place that we're like, okay, if a student hasn't logged in for this, you're going to get flagged. Like there's nothing, we don't have any kind of early alert in the system that way. And,
Yeah.
that would be kind of awesome.
Nothing automatic, but we do train faculty on, we use Canvas on this Canvas new analytics area that does provide data about the last time a student did what they call a participation. So they, commented on an announcement, they submitted to a discussion, they submitted a quiz. So we do train faculty on checking that data. But like Wendy said, we do also say, give them multiple chances, reach out to them at least once or twice before you drop them, because you never know. I've had so many times where a student where I was like, I'm really concerned about this student. I'm going to give them one more chance and reach out. And they made it through the class. And probably because I didn't drop them and I gave them one more shot. So we really do try and encourage faculty to give students that one extra chance to reach out, to be the one to make the effort. And I do think, the question to how we're ascertaining how faculty presence affects the student experience, I hope that the data we're seeing in your all study is an indication that we are having more faculty present and it is affecting the student experience. We were pleasantly surprised by the data and the lack of a success gap between modalities. And I really think that speaks to how much we are emphasizing to faculty, your presence matters. Online classes can be a positive, interactive experience for both the instructor and the student. That it is tougher. You take things for granted in the face-to-face environment that you just can't do in the online. It takes more effort. It takes more deliberate planning. It takes more instructor reaching out than it would in the face-to-face environment where the student can come to your desk after the end of class, but it's still worth it and it's still possible.
So I'll encourage our audience to keep sending in more questions. We have a few more minutes, but in the meanwhile, I'm going to ask one of my own, which is that have you identified any, I know Elise mentioned earlier that there are certain students, faculty feel that certain students are better suited for online education and others would just do better in an in-person class. Have you figured out any effective ways of either preparing students for taking distance education courses or perhaps directing them into a modality that best suits their needs?
Well, two things. One is all of us send out an email to our students before the semester starts, just saying, hey, is the online environment right for you? And we have like a little like Canvas student tutorial orientation thing. And they can get a little badge for like passing it. And it's helping them like understand, like, how do you upload an assignment? How do I do this? How do I do that? One of the things that I've seen when I'm like near my kids and they're in an online thing is that our students have the classes set up where they just go to the to-do list instead of going through the modules. And so, we encourage our faculty, like, have everything hidden and make them go through the modules so that they have to go through the material to get to the assignments. So that hopefully, it's how you're setting it up, and also like requiring them have to open a page before they can get into assignments. So that's one of the things, but the student readiness thing is a big deal. The other thing is, because we do the online help, I'm pointing is because that's next door to me, for our students, and we'll have students that are really struggling. We'll say, this class might be better for you in person. We have never directed a student saying, oh, stay in line if you really don't understand technology. We will say to students, like, this may not be the right modality because you're really struggling with turning on your computer or using it. But for some of our students, they're working full time, they're taking care of children or elderly parents. Online is their only option. So we offer, like, students can come in and get, like, we offer some guidance, like one-on-one, let me help you with some of this basic stuff. But when you have a student population of like 100,000 students, we can only do so much. But we really do try to reach them at least through the readiness modules, and at providing as much support as possible, and also really working with our faculty on having their classes set up in a consistent way so that when students log in, they're not seeing something so foreign from every single class, but if there's a consistency where in the trainings, we emphasize using the modules so that all the students know, like, that's where the meat of their course is.
Yeah, and in the past, the state has offered kind of readiness modules that we can point students to say, like, is online learning right for me? But I think it's hard because we're trying to strike a balance between not creating barriers. We don't want to have a class you can have to take before you can take an online class, because that, first of all, would prolong a student's ability to take those classes for a semester or however long. And, we just don't want to add external barriers to just getting into the classes. But at the same time, I think counseling is a big part of this too. We want the counselors to be educated about what it means to take a class online and maybe what classes are most appropriate for students to take online. For example, math classes are really hard to take online, and this is a discussion we have all the time. So especially if I was a student that struggled with math, I would not take an online math class, at least not to start. So it's also a matter of kind of counseling the student about which courses are most appropriate to take online and set you up for success.
And one of the questions we have here is this information about readiness publicly available? So I guess perhaps, do students have to sign up for one class before they actually see these modules, etc.? Or is this just available on the college's website? They can just go through it preemptively before they determine which modality works for them.
I think some colleges have the information just on their public-facing website, but the modules that are within campus, you do have to be a student to access. Just for IT security reasons, you can't log into our stuff without being an official student.
And one of the things that we heard from our focus group was that faculty face a lot of challenges with IT or dealing with classroom technology while they're teaching and maintaining student engagement while dealing with technology challenges. So have there been any effective ways that either colleges or the district has identified to navigate these challenges?
I mean, I think we're always going to have these challenges. It's like, it's technology. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. And I'd say as a teacher, that's probably one of our number one things is understanding about flexibility in teaching. But we do try to, across the district, they're trying to have consistent technology in every classroom so that faculty, especially our faculty who are adjuncts who teach at more than one campus, if they're going in to teach HyFlex at Pierce, it would be like the same similar classroom technology that they would have if they were teaching HyFlex at like West LA. So that's our goal, and they're trying to make that uniform within all of our classrooms, that it's similar, because similar to how DE coordinators used to be, where we were all individuals, same with technology. So I think the district is trying to really come together with having similar technology on all the campuses.
Right. And one of the emerging challenges with online education is the emergence of ChatGPT and artificial intelligence. Has this affected classrooms, and are there any ways in which you're able to support faculty with this? Is this part of what you plan to do in the future, perhaps?
Absolutely. This is probably the biggest topic that we get approached about in terms of faculty reaching out and discussions at committee meetings and things like that. I think we're trying to really find a balance between providing faculty with tools to, so they're not having to Google every student submission to see if it was plagiarized or not. So we have tools like Turnitin that do check for AI written content, with the huge caveat that it's not 100%. So there are going to get some students who are flagged when they are actual submissions that were not AI generated. So we're really trying to find the balance between providing tools to catch students, although we really try and emphasize the importance of not, coming from it just from a policing standpoint and like trying to get the students. We really want to make sure that we're teaching faculty that this is a tool that's not going away. It's a tool that actually faculty can use to their benefit. Many of our tools, for example, Harmonize, have AI built in where they can improve their discussion prompts through AI. They can have an AI generated rubric that is probably better than what most of us would come up with on our own. So we have to find the balance between embracing this technology and also making sure that students are producing authentic content. So we really try and educate instructors on how to use the technology and ask students to think critically about it. So, for example, ask students to have an AI generated answer and then analyze it and talk about how they could make it better and the shortcomings of that AI generated answer, rather than just being like, don't touch this tool, it's bad, it's scary, it's evil. When, we don't want to be hypocrites. We're using it ourselves in our lesson plannings and things like that. I don't know if you have anything to add, Wendy.
I'm just to say that that's actually exactly what I do with my students. I actually require them to use the ChatGPT, bring it back and analyze it, like what was correct about this, what was not correct about this. And I think that the students actually really like analyzing because it makes them go, oh, wow, this was really off. And so I think that really helping them to critically look at it's coming up with is really important and crucial, because it is here and it's not going anywhere.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for that amazing conversation. I think every time Wendy and Jessica, I talk to y'all, I learn so much more about distance education. And so really appreciate it and know that the audience did as well. I believe we're going to put some links in the chat. If you have any questions or follow-up, please feel free to reach out to me directly. We'll also put the project page in the chat so that you can follow there along for updates. We'll be releasing a few more briefs this spring. We'll also be sharing the recording from this webinar and other resources. So please do stay connected with the project. And thanks so much for taking the time and for joining us today.